Thank you. Well, I'm really excited to be here and talking about Angular 2. As you know, Angular 2 is very close to release, to final release. So I'll try to explain as much as I can in this session. So I'm going to talk about the new data architecture in Angular 2. And there are a few changes if you have used Angular before. So I'm going to show how Angular 2 works, and then I will go into the changes that have been introduced. So let's start. Well, how many of you are using Angular 2 today? Okay, very good, very good. And how many of you are new to Angular? Well, all good. Well, it doesn't matter. You don't need any previous experience, so that's all good. So let me tell you a little bit about me. After this excellent introduction, probably there's not much else to add, but I'll show you my avatar, and this is nothing like me, as you can see. Well, maybe only the bird. There's something going on there. And I use this avatar because sometimes I do a lot of different things, and sometimes there's a challenge, and I will be like, okay, I don't want to do these slides. And this happens for this talk. So I was like, oh, I need to do these slides. I don't find the energy. So I think about this white tiger, and then I can do anything. I can do anything. And this is how I do almost everything in the community or blogging or almost anything. I need extra effort to do the things, so this helps me a lot. You can see also the logo at the top. This is the Angular GDE logo. It's not very much used. You can find it on the Angular 2 website. And it comes when someone of us writes some article. So it's on the news section. I'll recommend you to go there, see what we are doing. And as Google developer expert, I hang out with cool people, so that also helps me to make cool friends and know all of the new things that are coming. So that's a great experience. What else? Well, my background is basically JavaScript, so I really like JavaScript. Then there's Angular 2, of course. And this is a community that I created in London. And we are doing a lot of stuff that you can follow. There are these webinars that we produce from time to time. And you can go to the YouTube channel and just be up to date on what's going on. I also like to introduce some events that are coming. And the next big event, it's Angular Connect. It's at the end of this month, and it will be awesome. It's not only because I'm going to do this talk there, but there will be a lot of the guys from the Angular core team will be there. And usually the speakers share the slides and the content. So if you are just watching and following this Twitter handler, you will get access to this content at the time. So that's something to take into account. So Angular 2 has been announced a long time ago. And if you have been following it, there's a lot of new features. So yeah, there's a lot of excitement. So yes, Angular 2. And it's coming now. It can be, any day now. So what are the features? What are these features that people is excited about? So Angular 2 is trying to use all the latest standards. And that's something that Angular 1 was getting a little bit behind. So Angular 2 tries to fix that. And we will see some examples. It's really simple to use. We will see that we can create our applications in a really easy way. It's going to be based in components, and these are just simple classes. So it's simple. There's another feature that is really interesting, and it's like performance. Performance-wise, Angular 2 is like really, really fast. And I don't have the numbers, but it's beating all the other frameworks. So that's really good news. And there's another feature that it's a little bit unprecedented, which is that works everywhere. Now, Angular 2 can be rendered on the server and can also be used on desktop and native apps. So this is really exciting. I'm not going to show any mobile or desktop application, but it's good that you know it's there. And some people think, oh, but who is using Angular 2? Well, there's a website that you can navigate. It's built with Angular 2. And there, you will find all these projects that are being built, and they are just published there. So there's people using it, and they are really happy, of course. So Angular 2, it's built using TypeScript. And I'm going to introduce the different options that you can use with Angular 2. So you can start using it with ECMAScript 5, of course. There's also the option to use ECMAScript 6. And then there's TypeScript, which is the language used by the core team. So in this diagram, we can see that ECMAScript 5 is already covered by ECMAScript 6. So ECMAScript 6 is adding some more features. And then we have TypeScript that it's covering all the other features available and adding some extra ones. So let's see some of these features. We have, in ECMAScript 6, we have classes. We also have the module system. We have imports that we are going to use extensively in Angular 2. And then there's some syntax sugar like arrow functions. And these are some nice features that modern languages are using today, but JavaScript was missing these features. So it's really exciting. But then the question is why the Angular core team decided to use TypeScript. Well, there's one feature, which is annotations. And annotations will help us to create, to add this metadata that we will put and add to our components, so we can use this as a really easy way to set up the system. And then, obviously, we have types and other nice features that are just good to have, like generics, interfaces. And this will help having a great editor support. So let's talk about Angular 2 tooling. So we have Visual Code, WebStorm, Text Sublime, and Atom. So there are many options. Any of the editors that you are using today, they are Angular 2 able or enabled. And with the help with TypeScript, they will be able to statically check your code and show you some warnings or help you refactor your code. There's another tool, this is a new tool, that will create this scaffold for your application and just cover all the common scenarios from the build to the unit testing and just making it really easy. I don't know if you can see it, but it's just in few commands we can have an Angular 2 setup ready to go. Just using npm, we will install the Angular CLI, which is the command line interface. And just using ng-new, we will just create an application. It will create all the scaffolding for us. And then using ng-serve, it will do the regular thing for a modern front-end development. So that makes it really easy. I like to cover bootstrapping, and this is when the Angular 2 application gets kick-started. So we need to think about how is this process going to start the rendering. We'll have different components. We have now ng module, which was released just a few weeks ago. So I want to cover that. In order to bootstrap our Angular 2 application, we need a root module that usually will be used, app module, will be called app module, and it will configure all the dependencies that we are going to make available for the whole application. So this will include the router, usually, the HTTP module, and then other services that we want to provide. There's also the chance to define some global values, and there's also the vendor dependencies. For Angular 2, we already have few of these vendor dependencies being built. As it hasn't been released yet, there are still, in latest beta or release candidate, like there's Angular material on the line, and other common libraries that you want to have. So this will go in there. So let me show you how an index HTML page will look with Angular 2. First, we have some polyfills just to make it work with all browsers. And then we have, at the end, we have System.js. This is a setup for online development. So probably when you want to use this in production, you will change it slightly. And you will just use the bundle, the final bundle. But this is for a runtime compilation. Then we have the system import that will just kickstart the process. So let's look into that. There's one thing, one important bit, that will be the element that will be the root component. And in this case, it's my app element. And we can add some extra information. We can add any HTML. For now, I'm just using loading. So this will show while the Angular 2 application is bootstrapping. If we follow that system load call, we will get into the main file. And we have different options. In this case, I'm using the runtime compilation, but now we also have the ahead of time compilation. I think the previous session covered it a little bit. I'm just going to show this runtime compilation setup. So we are passing the app module just using this bootstrap function. So that's pretty easy. If we navigate to this app module, we will find all the dependencies that we need, which is the root component, which in this case is the app class. And as you can see, we are using the imports from ECMAScript 6, so it's pretty standard. And then we have this browser module. So these are all the dependencies to work with DOM and the browser, which is easy from the name. Today, we have ng module that allow us to create all these using this annotation. We're just passing this object configuration, and we have different sections. So these keys, for example, the imports, will just tell Angular which are the modules that we will use. In this case, it's just the browser, so that's the basic setup. We also need to tell Angular which will be the component that will bootstrap. And Angular will use this component to render in the index.html page. So let's look into this root component. We're using now the component annotation. And this will be a common usage in Angular 2. So we will have different types of annotations that will just add this metadata. As you can see, they always follow this key, and then there's some initialization value. For the Bootstrap, we are now using selector to link with the element that we use in the index page. So this will tell Angular, okay, go to the index page, look for this element. We are using a CSS selector, so we are using the element selector in this component, and it will start the rendering using that element. The class is just a simple class. We are using export just to make it available to the other files, and it will just get a constructor and the methods that we require. So as you can see, the code is really, minimum. There's no boilerplate. We're just specifying, okay, we want to use that element. We have this template, which is really nice. So let's look a little bit more into detail on how we create these components. In Angular 2, we are using a component architecture, and we will get what we call a components tree. And we saw the root component, which is the app component, and then from there we will have child components in different levels. This will change depending on the application, but we always have like a root component and then the child component going down. So let's see one of these components, how we use them. As we saw, we use this annotation, and we use the @ symbol, and there are different ones. So we will see them in the examples, but they always use the @ sign, and then there's some keyword that will just tell us what is the metadata that we are adding. Components have inputs and outputs, and they will come in the form of attributes. We are talking about HTML customized elements, and the attributes will be the inputs, and then the outputs will be events that Angular 2 will expose. And we can use either a key on the annotation, or we can use an extra annotation that we can use in properties in the class. Angular 2 also added the component lifecycle hooks, and these will be different moments in time in the lifecycle of the component that we can add our code. I'll show you some of them and what's the order of execution. There's another interesting feature that was not present on Angular 1, which is having access to the host element. And that will allow us to change the element where this component is being used. So we can add, for example, a class to the host component. We can also register some event, and that makes it really, really easy to think about. So we don't have to use this, okay, go to the parent and then access to this API. We can just use the host. Then for the component, we have seen that we can import the annotation from the core. And then we use the selector, which will select this HTML element in the template. And we are using element selector, but if we wanted to use an attribute, we could use the square brackets, for example. Or if it was an ID, we will use the hash. So this is not the full CSS selector specification, but all the common selectors will work. Then we have some other properties that we can set up for our component. And this will be the styles, and we can just use the styles inline, which will be more efficient than just referencing a file. So we will save some Ajax calls in here. But also it will depend if our build system can take the, the styles or the templates and just embed them during the building process. So it will change depending on the setup. But this is the common practice. We can just embed the styles or the templates in line, and this will be the most efficient way. So we talk about these lifecycle hooks. Let's see which is the order. So the first one that we'll execute will be the constructor, and this will be executed by the dependency injection framework. Then we will get this event, which is ng-on-changes, and this will be if the input or the outputs have changed, we will be notified in this lifecycle hook, which is really powerful. And then this is another one that is really common, and it's when all the components and child components have been initialized, this ng-on-init will be called. So this is the recommended handler to add our code instead of the constructor. What happens is if we use the constructor to do or add our logic, it will become really heavy for dependency injection. So every time we inject the class, the constructor will get executed. So it will make the application a little bit less performant. So you should use this handler instead. And then there's the cleanup. So you should remember this handler, which will allow us to, for example, unsubscribe or do some cleanup if we have some handlers that we don't want to leave behind. Okay, so that was all cool. We have Bender, really excited. It's a guest. I always try to add some guest. Okay, so let's look into the templating. I'm just going through some of the basic concepts. We will get into HTTP really soon and all the architecture stuff. So this is the template syntax for Angular 2. And you will see that there are different things going on in there. This is all standard, so it's following the standard. We have the interpolation. We're using the curly braces, and we have seen this before. But this is more exciting. So we have these square brackets. And you can see that I'm writing value. So this value is the actual property in the DOM element. This is not a directive, so it's really accessing the DOM element, which makes Angular 2 future-proof. If there is some change on the HTML5 specification, Angular 2 will be able to access that property.